In this next video, we will talk about quantitative and qualitative research. Just a review of this week's learning objectives, and to let you know that this video covers information about learning objective number 6, but textbook chapter number 2 also provides more detail about all of this. As a bit of a warm-up, the following are two purpose statements. And the textbook talked about purpose statements a bit, and we're going to cover this in more detail in subsequent weeks. But basically, a purpose statement is what is the researcher actually setting out to do in his or her research study. So it's kind of like a research question, but stating it as a statement. So if we take a look at these two, one of them is quantitative and one of them is qualitative research. So if you read through these two, which is which, how do you know, and what clues you in? So again, please take a moment to pause the video and read through these and think about your answer. The first statement is qualitative research, and what should clue you in is the word explore, even maybe the words beliefs, and focus groups, because focus groups are a type of interview, which is a type of qualitative data collection. The second one is quantitative, and what should clue you in is words like variables and predict. So in terms of, when we think about research, we think about sort of this general approach. Is it quantitative research? Is it qualitative research? Or is it mixed methods? And mixed methods refers to when research has both a quantitative and a qualitative proportion. So take a moment, pause. What are words that you associate with quantitative studies? What are words you associate with qualitative studies? What are the things that might clue you in of what's what when you see an abstract or you see a purpose statement? So perhaps for quantitative, you came up with words like hypotheses, variables, numbers, statistics, generalizability, prediction, testing, experiment. And perhaps for qualitative research, you thought of words like explore, meaning, nuance, interpret, flexible, complex, etc. In terms of specific research designs, and this is going to give you an overview, but towards the end of the course, we're also going to talk about each of these, talk about experiments, talk about surveys, and talk about qualitative research designs in a little bit more detail. But I just wanted to give you a heads up now. So in terms of quantitative research, this is often distinguished in behavioral and social sciences, like HDF, is distinguished between experiments and non-experiments. And an experiment is something where the researcher is doing something. They're doing some sort of manipulation. They're giving an intervention. There's a research group. There's a control group, right? As opposed to a survey where you're going out and you're asking people questions about themselves, but you're not doing anything to them. You're just asking them questions, and then these questions can be converted to numbers. Qualitative research, in terms of research design or ways to collect data, includes what we call narrative research, and that might be what you think of first, looking at interviews, looking at focus groups. Also observations, right? Going out and observing individuals, groups in their natural settings. You might also come across the word ethnography. And perhaps the one that you're least familiar with is what is sometimes called archival research. Other times you see it as content analysis, and that's looking at documents. So that's looking at documents, or what might be called artifacts, of things that people produce that we think reflects how they live. So it could be things like diary entries, or newspaper articles, or even in more recent times, looking at people's Twitter posts, looking at people's Facebook posts, even looking at Instagram, like some visual things as well. So quantitative and qualitative research, they're both research. They both involve data collection and data analysis, but sometimes some questions or research purposes lend themselves to quantitative research and others lend themselves to qualitative research. But both have their potential advantages. So in terms of quantitative research, some advantages are looking at trends, and oftentimes we can look at trends for a large group or maybe even representing a larger population. Oftentimes we can get a cause and effect, but I would warn you now to be careful with that word effect, because in research that means something particular. It means that you really can say X caused Y, but a lot of times we can get at that. Looking at prediction, looking at relationships between variables. In terms of qualitative research, some advantages are being able to get at complexity or nuance or detail of a situation, being able to explore a phenomenon that hasn't been explored before, and hearing about individuals' experiences in their own words, which can also be more in depth and more detailed. So which do you prefer to read in your other classes? Which do you find easier to read? In this class, we'll be looking at both, but it's worth it to take a moment to reflect and think about, is there a certain type of research that you're drawn to over another? So the last thing we're going to do is I would ask you to use your research imagination. So how could you study this question? How could you study the connection between college major and students' happiness and well-being using a quantitative research design and using a qualitative research design? So if you haven't been taking notes, you might want to pause it here. Well, pause it here in general to reflect on this, but you might want to go back and look at those research designs to think about this in more detail. I hope you've taken a few minutes to pause and to think about answering these questions on your own. There's no really right or wrong answer. Well, there is, but I would imagine that if you've been paying attention, if you read the chapter, you can come up with a right answer. So I'll just give some examples. Maybe one way to do this would be to survey people that have different majors. Maybe you can give them some sort of happiness scale and then compare the different majors. That would be a quantitative research design. Maybe if you're doing a qualitative research design, that would involve observing people. So going around and observing the body language of people of different majors and seeing how happy do they look. Perhaps another way using content analysis could be to look at people's Facebook posts. I don't know if people use Facebook, but some sort of social media posts, and assess whether they are sort of positive or negative, and use that as sort of a judgment of different majors, how positive or negative are they in their social media. And that concludes video lecture 2.